They just wanted a peaceful family vacation. But at the sparkling hotel pool under the Spanish sun, suspicious stares turned into something far worse. Security was called, then the police. The children were shaken, the mother frightened, but the father remained calm. Because he knew, the moment he showed his badge, everything would change. What they didn't know, the quiet, smiling man they just humiliated, was a high-ranking FBI agent. And that day, he wasn't about to stay silent. It was the kind of summer morning that begged for nothing more than peace. The sea air was thick with salt, warmed by the golden Spanish sun that cast shimmering reflections across the infinity. Pool of the Mar Azul Grand Resort. Situated along the pristine coastline of Costa del Sol, the resort was a haven for the wealthy, the powerful, and those simply seeking an escape from life's noise. It had white stone walkways lined with towering palms, soft jazz music floating from hidden speakers, and waiters in white uniforms, gliding past with trays of sangria and cocktails. Among the privileged guests that week was the Johnson family, American family of 4, visiting Spain for the first time. From afar, they looked like any other well-to-do tourists. Stylish swimsuits, sunglasses, and an air of quiet joy. But for Darren Johnson, this trip wasn't just about sunbathing and sightseeing. It was a promise fulfilled, a long overdue vacation. With his family after a harrowing 18-month undercover operation back in the US, Darren was a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his early 40s. He carried himself with a quiet strength, the kind that made people step aside without realizing why. His eyes, sharp and calculating, rarely missed a detail. Years of working deep cover for the FBI had trained him to always scan, always assess. But today, he was just a father, a husband, a man determined to reclaim time lost. His wife Denise was elegance in motion, with dark brown skin that glowed in the sunlight and a calming grace in her voice. She often softened Darren's hardened edges. She was a professor of political science at a university in Virginia and possessed a commanding intellect that both inspired and intimidated. Today, she wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and a flowing caftan, her Kindle tucked beneath one arm as she settled onto a chaise lounge. Their children, 8-year-old Ava and 10-year-old Marcus, darted toward the pool with the joy of children who had waited too long to splash. Ava wore a pink one-piece swimsuit covered in cartoon jellyfish, her braids bouncing as she ran. Marcus had already cannonballed into the deep end, shouting out a victory yell as water sprayed nearby sunbathers. For the first time in years, Darren allowed himself to exhale. He leaned back on his chair, the sunlight warm against his bare chest, a pair of aviator sunglasses resting on his face. No burner phones, no wiretaps, no safe houses, just his family. Just now, but even in paradise, old habits die hard. Darren noticed things others would ignore, like the way the front desk clerk had hesitated, just slightly, when handing them their key card, or how the elderly white couple 2 rows down had stared a little too long when the family passed them near the elevators. He had dismissed them small things, easily imagined. They were in Europe after all. Things were different here, supposedly better, more progressive. And yet, there it was again, a hotel employee, young, pale, and wearing a tight black polo with the Mar Azul logo, stood by the towel station, whispering to a colleague while clearly watching Marcus swim. His eyes narrowed slightly, his hand gesturing subtly toward the boy. Darren's jaw tightened. Denise, ever perceptive, noticed too. "Don't," she said gently without looking away from her book. "Just watching." Darren replied, his voice even. "They're just curious. Maybe they're not used to seeing black families here. That's a problem in itself." Denise sighed and reached over to hold his hand. "It's our vacation. Let's not start building walls where we don't need them." Darren squeezed her hand, but his instincts refused to settle. He'd seen how quickly casual curiosity could turn to something uglier. His family didn't fit the stereotype Benny held in places like this. He didn't wear flashy chains. He didn't talk loud or act out of place. He was methodical, composed sometimes. Too composed. But none of that mattered when people already had their minds made up. As the day went on, the heat intensified and the pool became more crowded. Guests arrived in small clusters, most of them white and European well-dressed couples. Elegant families, older retirees with leathery tans. The Johnsons remained polite, unobtrusive, just another family enjoying the sun. But the glances continued, the whispering near the cabanas, the slight hush when Darren passed a group. And then, a new presence emerged. A man in a dark navy blazer, clearly not a lifeguard or hotel staff, paced along the pool's perimeter. His eyes scanned the area like he was looking for someone in particular. He stopped when he spotted Darren. There was no friendliness in his posture, only skepticism. Darren straightened. Denise looked up. Ava swam closer to the edge, noticing the shift in her father's body language. Marcus, still laughing in the shallow end, remained blissfully unaware. "Can I help you?" Darren called out, calmly but firmly. The man didn't answer. He turned and walked briskly away, disappearing into the lobby. "Who was that?" Denise asked. "Security. Or something close," Darren murmured. "Someone called them. For what?" "I have a guess," he replied, his voice growing colder. Denise looked visibly upset now. "Darren, I'm not going to cause a scene. But I'm not going to let them intimidate us either." And just like that, the air shifted. The tranquility of the Mar Athol Grand Resort remained on the surface, but under it, something had changed. Something ancient and familiar, the weight of being watched. The sense of needing to prove they belonged. Darren stood slowly, scanning again, this time with more intent. The vacation might have started with laughter and sun, but deep inside he knew something was coming, and he would be ready. The heat hadn't broken, but the mood had. The serene bubble around the Mar Athol Grand Resort had thinned almost imperceptibly, but Darren Johnson felt it in his bones. Something had shifted, and in his line of work, former undercover, current supervisory agent at the FBI, that kind of shift never ended well. After the man in the navy blazer disappeared into the lobby, Darren tried to push down the instinct to follow. Instead, he stayed seated, watching his children. Marcus had now made friends with two Spanish kids about his age, tossing a beach ball across the shallow end. Ava floated peacefully on a unicorn pool float, her eyes closed under her pink sunglasses. Denise, however, had gone quiet, her Kindle untouched on her lap. "Darren," she said softly, "do you think someone complained?" "I'd bet money on it," he replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Could have been one of the guests. Or that pool attendant." She exhaled. "For what? Laughing too loud? Swimming while black?" He looked at her, and for a moment, their eyes locked in mutual exhaustion. They'd lived in this reality for years, back home in the States. But here was supposed to be different. Europe was meant to be the safe breath between chapters. The break before school started again, before another year of code switching, negotiating space, and shrinking themselves in predominantly white circles. It was Denise who finally stood first, stretching her arms like she was trying to shake the tension out of her muscles. "I'm going to get Ava dried off," she said. "You want to bring Marcus in?" Darren nodded, grateful for the excuse to move. As he stood and whistled for Marcus, he noticed something else. A hotel employee speaking into a radio just outside the pool gates. The man glanced at Darren before quickly turning away. Marcus came jogging over, barefoot and dripping water. "5 more minutes, Dad, please? I'm winning." 5 minutes, Darren said with a half smile. Then sunscreen and lunch. Marcus grinned and ran back, but the smile faded from Darren's face the moment he turned. Two uniformed Policia local officers were approaching the pool area from the resort walkway. They weren't rushing, but their walk had purpose. Darren's shoulders stiffened. He counted two both white Spanish men, early 30s. One had a notepad already in his hand. The other rested a hand on his utility belt. The hotel employee with the radio was following close behind them. Denise saw it too. She pulled Ava closer and instinctively wrapped her towel tighter around her daughter. The officers made their way directly to Darren Sayor. One of them said curtly, "May we speak with you?" Darren didn't respond immediately. He took a step forward and looked around. Several guests had gone quiet, their heads turning. He could feel the weight of assumptions drop on his back. About what? He asked, voice calm but steely. There was a call. The second officer added in accented English about disturbing behavior at the pool. We were asked to check on the situation. Darren blinked slowly. Disturbing behavior. Yes, sir. A report was made by hotel staff. He could feel Marcus watching from the water, frozen, confused. Ava clung tighter to her mother's hand. Denise said nothing, but her eyes were burning. Darren's posture didn't change. He was still shirtless, still wearing swim trunks and flip-flops, but the air around him was suddenly colder. Did they say what exactly the complaint was? He asked too loud. Possible trespassing. We were told the guests in question did not appear to be staying here. Interesting, Darren said, raising an eyebrow. So I'm being questioned because someone didn't think I looked like I belonged. No. Sir, that is not. We've been here 3 nights. Room 608. Paid in full with an American Express Platinum. He took a half step forward. You can check it yourself. Officers exchanged a glance. One started scribbling something into the notepad. The other tried again. We're just here to verify. Darren gave a tight smile. I can save you some time. And then calmly, deliberately, he reached for his bag on the pool chair, slowly, no sudden movements. Every move practiced like muscle memory. He opened a leather wallet and produced a small, official-looking badge. Gold, embossed, gleaming in the sun. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The officers leaned in automatically, and Darren let the silence stretch just long enough. I'm Supervisory Special Agent Darren Johnson, he said, cool and measured. I advise you to write down my name clearly, because if you're looking for someone trespassing at this hotel, it sure as hell isn't me or my family. The scribbling stopped. Denise stepped forward now, her voice sharper than glass. You've frightened my children. You've humiliated my husband. And we've done nothing but swim in the pool we paid to access. Ava, now holding her mom's hand tightly, looked up with wide, confused eyes. Marcus had quietly gotten out of the water, towel draped across his shoulders, unsure if he was supposed to be scared or angry. One of the officers cleared his throat. Senator Johnson, this is a misunderstanding. No, Darren said firmly. It's a pattern. And it happens everywhere I go. The silence grew heavier. Other guests were watching more openly. Now, a few looked away awkwardly. A woman with a camera phone pretended not to be filming. Then a different voice joined the conversation. Deeper, older. I'll handle this. The man in the navy blazer had returned, now confirmed to be the hotel manager. He introduced himself quickly. His expression composed, but his eyes jittery. Sayor Johnson, he said with a slight bow of his head. I apologize for this inconvenience. I assure you, it was a miscommunication. A staff member misunderstood and escalated improperly. Please accept our sincerest apology. Denise stepped forward again. And what about our children? Do they get an apology too? The manager looked down, shame flushing across his face. Yes, of course. I will speak with them personally. Darren didn't answer right away. He slipped the badge back into his bag and stood tall. I'm here with my family. We're staying 2 more nights. And I expect we'll be left in peace. or we'll have a very public conversation with the U.S. consulate. And I'll make sure the FBI adds your hotel to its formal travel advisory list. The manager paled. Yes, sir. The officers mumbled quick apologies and turned to leave. The manager followed, but the damage had already been done. As Darren gathered his family and began drying off the kids, he felt something ache deep in his chest. Not fear, not even anger, just weariness. That familiar bitter taste of being reminded again that no title, badge, or job could fully protect you from the suspicion cast by skin. But this time, they picked the wrong man to profile, and it wasn't over yet. The sun hovered high above the Costa del Sol, casting its golden shimmer over the infinity pool of the exclusive Sapphire Breeze Resort. Waves of luxury moved with the breeze, tropical drinks in crystal glasses, faint flamenco guitar playing. Near the cabanas, and staff trained to cater to the wealthiest tourists from across the globe. Among the vacationing elite, Darren Johnson reclined on a chaise lounge under a sun umbrella, pretending to read a travel magazine while keeping a protective eye on his family. Denise, his wife, was reading next to him, her oversized sunglasses, shielding her from both the sun and the unnecessary attention they'd been receiving since their arrival. A few yards away, Marcus, their 13-year-old son, was racing across the shallow end of the pool with a small snorkel, trying to impress his little sister Ava, who giggled as she splashed and twirled with floaties around her arms. They were just trying to enjoy their family holiday, but something had changed since the first day. Whispers followed them when they passed the lobby. One of the concierge staff no longer smiled when Darren requested anything. A certain look lingered from the waiters when they served his family, polite but cold. The stares weren't obvious, but to Darren, an FBI field supervisor back in D.C. with instincts sharper than a blade, it felt exactly like surveillance. He tried to brush it off. After all, he was on vacation. Spain had been Denise's dream trip for years. The kids were finally old enough to appreciate culture and history, and Darren had promised himself, that this summer would be different. No missions, no phones, no politics. Just sun, sand, and peace. But peace is a strange thing when you're black and successful. On their first day, an older couple at the breakfast buffet had given Denise a strange look when she reached for a plate. Beside them, the woman clutched her purse a little tighter. On the second day, Ava had been mistaken for another guest's child by a staff member, who tried to escort her away from the pool until Marcus intervened. Today was day 3, and things were escalating. As Darren sipped his orange spritz, 2 hotel security guards entered the pool area, walking with intentional steps. One pointed toward Marcus. Darren stiffened. "Stay seated," Denise murmured through her teeth. The guards reached the edge of the pool and called out, "Excuse me, young man," in English with thick Spanish accents. "We need to speak with your parents." Marcus looked up, confused, then turned toward Darren. Darren stood up calmly, set his drink down, and walked over. "Yes?" Darren said, towering over them. His voice was calm, but his presence immediately shifted the energy. He was over 6 feet tall, composed, powerful. The badge might be off-duty, but the training never was. "We've had reports," one of the guards said, hesitating, "that your son was being aggressive in the pool. Splashing, chasing other guests' children." Denise came up behind Darren now, arms crossed. Ava held her hand, confused and nervous. "Aggressive?" Darren echoed, eyebrows raised. "My son is 13. He's been playing with his sister." If someone felt uncomfortable, they could have addressed it directly like adults. The guards seemed unsure now, as if realizing they were underestimating the wrong man. "It's just procedure, sir. We need to keep all guests feeling safe. Then I suggest you investigate all the guests, not just the black ones," Denise said sharply. Other guests around the pool had begun to glance over. The tension was no longer quiet. Phones were out. Darren could feel his body tightening, Muscles trained to act when things went sideways, but he refused to lose control here. Not in front of Marcus. Not in front of Ava. You can report back to whoever made the complaint. Darren said coolly that the Johnson family is here on vacation. We paid for this suite. We booked with the full VIP package. We've done absolutely nothing wrong. Now, unless you're accusing my son of a crime, I suggest you walk away and tell your manager we'd like to speak with them. The guards exchanged a look, half embarrassed, half irritated, but eventually nodded and left the poolside. Darren turned back to Marcus and gave him a silent nod, the kind that fathers give sons when they're proud, but holding back fire. That evening, they sat on the hotel balcony, watching the ocean blur into the dusk. Denise poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Darren. I saw you today, she said softly. You handled it perfectly. I wanted to do more, Darren admitted. But I've learned that sometimes the strongest move is not giving them what they expect. I hate that we have to walk that line, she said. Even here. Even on vacation. He nodded. It's never about where we are. It's about who they see us as. But they don't see the truth, Marcus chimed in. He was sitting nearby, scrolling through his phone. They see what they want to see. Darren looked at his son, a mix of admiration and sorrow in his heart. Then we make sure they can't look away from the truth, son. We live it. Every day, the stars began to pierce the Spanish sky, and the breeze off the sea softened the sting of the day. The Johnsons were together, unshaken, and tomorrow Darren knew he'd make sure the manager of Sapphire Breeze Resort remembered exactly who they were. Not just guests, not just black, but a proud family, respected, powerful. And unbeknownst to the hotel, the father was an active FBI agent, and he wasn't here just to relax anymore. The sun dipped lower over the Costa del Sol, casting a golden hue over the hotel's private beach. Darren Johnson stood barefoot in the sand, the waves gently lapping at his toes. He had spent years undercover, moving through dangerous places, with a controlled mind and quiet vigilance, but nothing had prepared him for the raw emotion he felt now. Watching his son Marcus quietly rebuild a sandcastle with his little sister Ava. Just hours earlier, both had cried in his arms after the hotel security dragged them out of the pool area like criminals. His blood boiled at the memory. Beside him, Denise slipped her hand into his, her touch grounding him. We should call someone, she said softly, looking toward the hotel where they were still technically guests. Maybe the embassy. I already did, Darren said, eyes never leaving the horizon. And I called the bureau. Denise's head snapped toward him. You what? I'm not letting this go, Dee, he said, his jaw tight. They put their hands on my children. They humiliated you in public. And they didn't even ask questions. Just saw our skin color and decided we didn't belong. Denise sighed, torn between pride and fear. They don't know who they messed with, she said, more to herself than to him. No. They don't, Darren replied, turning away from the water. But they're about to find out. Back inside the hotel lobby, things had returned to their usual sleek, glossy elegance. Tourists sipped cocktails under hanging chandeliers. Live flamenco music echoed from the bar area. But when Darren walked in still barefoot, still in beach shorts, his FBI credentials clipped clearly on the lanyard around his neck, the staff froze. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I'd like to speak to your general manager, he said to the concierge, who immediately went pale. Now the man stuttered. Sir, one moment, please. He disappeared behind the glass office door so fast it nearly swung off the hinge. Denise walked up moments later with Marcus and Ava, both changed into dry clothes, both still clearly shaken. Darren looked at them, then at the camera above them. Front desk. That footage better still be there. 3 security guards emerged from the back offices, among them the same 2 who had forcibly removed Marcus and Ava. They were laughing about something until they saw Darren. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, visibly stiffened. "You," Darren said, pointing at him. "Come here." The man hesitated. "I said, come here," Darren repeated, his voice still calm. But something in his tone pierced the air like a blade. The other guests around them grew quiet, sensing the storm approaching. The man approached, glancing nervously at the others. "I don't know what this is about," he began, but Darren cut him off. "You laid hands on my children. There was a complaint." The man tried again. "Don't interrupt me," Darren said sharply. "There was no complaint. There was racial profiling. You didn't ask. You didn't confirm. You didn't even check their room number. You saw 2 black kids in your fancy pool and thought, that can't be right. And then you dragged them out in front of dozens of guests. Now the other hotel guests were watching. Some had stopped eating. Others were recording. "My name is Darren Johnson," he said clearly. "I am a supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have served my country in counterterrorism, deep undercover narcotics, and international intelligence operations for over 17 years. And right now I'm standing here not as an agent, but as a father whose children were assaulted and traumatized at your hotel." The manager arrived, flanked by 2 nervous PR staff. "Mr. Johnson," he began, "please let's take this to a private room." Darren's gaze didn't flinch. "No, right here is fine." Denise stepped forward. "All we wanted was a peaceful vacation," she said, her voice trembling, but clear. "Instead, we were treated like intruders. My children were accused of trespassing. We were told the pool wasn't for non-guests, but we booked the penthouse suite. We've been here 4 nights. You didn't even bother to ask." The manager wrung his hands, sweat already visible on his temples. "This is unacceptable," he muttered. "You're right," Darren said. "It is unacceptable. And I intend to file charges, civil and criminal. I want the footage pulled, preserved, and duplicated. I want statements from every employee involved. And I want it in writing by tomorrow morning, that your hotel is accepting full responsibility." "But Mr. Johnson," the manager stammered, "surely this can be." "I don't want compensation," Darren said flatly. "I want accountability." The silence in the lobby was deafening. No music, no chatter. Just the weight of the moment, pressing on every corner of the room. That evening, news began to spread. Somehow, a tourist had uploaded the video of Darren's calm takedown speech in the lobby. Within hours, it hit local Spanish news. By midnight, American blogs had picked it up. FBI agent confronts racist hotel staff in Spain. Messages flooded in. Reporters wanted interviews. Civil rights lawyers offered pro bono help. The hotel's parent company issued a public apology. But Darren wasn't done. Because for him, this wasn't just about justice, it was about Marcus and Ava, who had to learn far too early what the world could be like. Back on the balcony, Darren tucked his daughter into her travel bed. She clutched her teddy bear tightly. "Daddy," she whispered, "are they going to come back?" He knelt beside her. "No, sweetie," he said gently, "they're not. And if they ever try again, they'll have to go through me." She nodded sleepily and closed her eyes. From the doorway, Denise watched her husband in silence. When he rose, she embraced him tightly. "You're more than just an agent," she said softly. Darren kissed her forehead. "I'm just a father," he whispered. "And I'll burn the world down before I let anyone hurt my family again." The stillness of early morning in Costa del Sol had a way of magnifying unspoken truths. As the sea mist curled gently through the olive trees outside, Darren sat alone at the kitchen table, eyes locked on a single envelope, thick, ivory, and embossed with the logo of a Madrid-based law firm. Denise hadn't seen it yet. Neither had the kids. He wasn't ready. It was his father's will. He had delayed opening it for months, emotionally paralyzed. Darren had always had a complicated relationship with his late father, a man whose wealth was matched only by the control he wielded over everyone around him. The villa they lived in, the investments Darren was managing, even the school Marcus and Ava attended, all touched by the long, invisible reach of a man now buried in a family mausoleum north of Barcelona. Denise walked in, her silk robe trailing softly behind her. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he tapped the envelope with his index finger. "It came." Denise's eyes narrowed. "Is it what we were afraid of?" He nodded. It's worse. The inheritance, as it turned out, was not entirely his. A clause had been inserted, one that even the attorneys found highly unconventional. His father had left behind controlling interest of the family's primary real estate portfolio, not to Darren, but to Marcus, his 16-year-old son. On one condition, Darren had to mentor him, business to business, father to son, for exactly 1 year. After that, the shares would legally transfer. If Darren failed, walked away, missed even one designated quarterly milestone, all assets would divert to a faceless board of trustees chosen by the law firm. Strangers. Denise looked horrified. "That's insane. He's a child." Darren exhaled. "It's not about Marcus. It's about control. Even from the grave, my father's testing me." "But Marcus," she protested, lowering her voice as if their son could hear from upstairs. "He doesn't even know what's going on. He's barely recovered from the move here. He's got exams. He's just a boy." Darren rubbed his temples. "Which is why I'm afraid. Because if I start this process, I'm pulling him into the same machine that nearly destroyed me." Later that day, Darren sat across from Marcus in the small study overlooking the pool. He had always admired how fast his son picked up on things. Numbers, systems, people. But he also saw something in Marcus that terrified him, the same hungry drive he once had. The same desire to prove something, anything, to a man who never said, "I'm proud of you, Dad." Marcus said, noticing the hesitation on Darren's face. "What's going on? I need to talk to you." "It's about the company. About our future." Marcus leaned in, alert. "Okay." Darren explained everything. The clause, the timeline, the twisted challenge left by a man they'd barely mourned. To his surprise, Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't cry or get angry. He simply stared at the papers, then at his father. "So, I'd be in charge eventually." Darren nodded. "But only if I teach you. And only if we do this together." "It's a trap, Marcus, a golden trap. If we walk in, there's no going back." There was a long pause. Then Marcus asked the one question Darren hadn't prepared for. "Why do you think he gave it to me?" Darren was silent for a moment. "Because he didn't trust me." "Not fully, and maybe because he wanted to test us both." Later that evening, Darren stood on the balcony, looking out at the stars. Denise joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "So?" she asked. "He wants to try," Darren said softly. "He's ready." She rested her head against his shoulder. "And are you?" "I don't know. But I can't let my father's ghost run this family any longer. If Marcus wants in, I'll guide him. But I'll do it our way." 3 months passed. The mentorship had begun. Meetings, spreadsheets, site visits. At first, it was exhilarating. Marcus thrived, soaking up everything like a sponge. Darren found pride blooming inside him in ways he hadn't felt in years. But that pride was tangled with fear. What if Marcus became just like him? Then one afternoon, during a tense negotiation with a hotel chain, Marcus blurted out a counteroffer that stunned the room. It was bold, calculated, ruthless. After the meeting, Darren confronted him. "Where did you learn that move?" Marcus shrugged. "I read some of Grandpa's old memos. He was a shark. But he got results." Darren's stomach dropped. "You're not him." Marcus. "No," his son said, coolly. "But maybe I need to be, if I'm going to lead." That night, Darren walked alone along the beach. waves crashing around his feet. He felt like he was watching a mirror form, one he couldn't shatter. He wanted Marcus to succeed, but not at the cost of his kindness, his youth. He had to intervene, not as a businessman, but as a father. 1 week later, Darren took Marcus on an unannounced trip to a crumbling, abandoned seaside property the company had once rejected as unprofitable. They sat on overturned crates, eating sandwiches Darren had made himself. "Why are we here?" Marcus asked. Darren smiled. "Because I want to teach you the most important lesson my father never taught me." Marcus waited. "This land. It has no current value, no prestige, no buyers, but it's beautiful. And if you look past the spreadsheets and projections, if you really see it, there's potential. You just have to care enough." Marcus looked around, slowly absorbing the view. "You don't build a legacy just by making deals, son," Darren continued. "You build it by loving what you create. Not because it'll make money, but because it means something." Marcus said nothing at first, but as they stood to leave, he whispered, "Maybe we should invest here anyway. Just the two of us." Darren smiled. "That's the first real idea I've heard all week." The golden light of dawn poured gently over Costa del Sol, casting long shadows on the marble terrace of the Johnson Villa. Darren Johnson stood silently with a cup of strong Spanish coffee in hand, gazing out over the ocean. The events of the past week still echoed in his chest like distant thunder. The threats, the fear, the man in the alley, and the deepening mystery behind the wealthy circles of Malaga, they all had left him on edge. But this morning felt different. It was quiet. Too quiet. Inside, Denise was helping Ava pack her school bag, while Marcus sat on the couch, pretending to read a comic, but clearly keeping an eye on the front windows. Ever since the incident outside the piano studio, Darren had insisted on extra security. 2 private guards were now stationed discreetly near their property. Not that Denise fully approved, but she no longer resisted. Not after she saw the bruises on Darren's shoulder from the late-night altercation. "Have you thought any more about it?" Denise asked softly later that morning, when the kids had left and they were alone in the kitchen. "About what?" Darren replied, sipping his coffee. "About us. Going back to the States." He sighed, placing the mug down slowly. "Every time I think about it, I remember why we came here in the first place. The peace, the beauty, a life away from the noise. But it's not peaceful anymore," she said. "And something tells me this isn't over." Darren didn't respond, because deep down, he agreed. Later that day, he received a call from Inspector Ramos. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Senator Johnson, we have an update. I think you need to come down to the station." When Darren arrived, he was led to a private room. Ramos sat across from him with a thick folder. "We've identified the man who threatened your son," he began. "His name is Julio Mendez, known associate of a criminal figure tied to some elite circles here. But here's where it gets strange. Mendez was found last night, unconscious in an alleyway in Marbella. Someone got to him before we could." Darren leaned forward. "Was he alive?" "Barely. He's in intensive care. But before he lost consciousness, he kept repeating a name. Yours." Darren's blood ran cold. "We believe you're being watched," Ramos continued. "And we believe this may go deeper than just a street-level threat. Something or someone is using these men as pawns. And your family is in the middle of it." That night, Darren didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in his home office, staring at old files from his life before Spain, before Costa del Sol, before the villa, before the dream. Back then, in Washington, he'd consulted for government contracts, high-level logistics, risk assessment, cyber infrastructure. He'd made enemies, sure, but none that would follow him this far. Or so he thought. In the quiet hours of dawn, something finally clicked. A name he'd seen mentioned once in an old email chain, now surfacing again in Ramos's report. Silvio Vega, a billionaire investor with ties to Malaga's most influential families. Rumored to be involved in covert intelligence during the Cold War, a man who vanished off the radar for decades, only to re-emerge as a philanthropist and patron of the arts in Spain. Vega had hosted Ava's piano school fundraiser last spring. Darren remembered the name on the banner. It wasn't random. By sunrise, Darren had made a decision. He would confront this directly, not for revenge, but for answers. With Marcus discreetly dropped off at school and Ava safely at her music class, accompanied by a bodyguard, Darren asked Denise to trust him just one more time. "This ends today," he said. He drove alone to the Vega estate, a massive villa perched on the cliffs near Nerja. Guards tried to stop him, but Darren had expected that. He'd already contacted Ramos, who reluctantly agreed to follow with backup if Darren could buy them enough time. Inside the estate's private courtyard, Darren finally met the man himself. Silvio Vega was tall, thin, and unnervingly calm. Dressed in a linen suit, he looked like a retired actor playing the part of a villain. "Mr. Johnson," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I was wondering when we'd finally meet." "I know what you've done," Darren replied coldly. Vega shrugged. "Done? No, I don't think you do. You were never the target." "Not really. You were leverage. You stepped into a space where you didn't belong. This isn't about me, is it?" Darren said, voice hardening. "It's about someone else. Someone you're trying to draw out." "You're sharp," Vega chuckled. "Too sharp, perhaps. But..." Before he could continue, the estate gates burst open. Police vehicles swarmed in, lights flashing. Vega raised an eyebrow. "You brought friends?" "I don't play alone," Darren said. 2 days later, Vega was detained pending investigation. The media tried to bury it, but the scandal leaked anyway. A quiet war was brewing behind the scenes in Malaga's elite society, but the Johnson family was officially out of it. Inspector Ramos met Darren one last time. "Go home. Leave this place. Take your family and disappear." Darren nodded. "We will." The Johnsons moved quietly out of Spain 3 weeks later. Their time in Costa del Sol had ended not with a sunset, but with the kind of silence that comes after surviving a storm. As the plane rose above Malaga, Denise held Darren's hand tightly. Marcus leaned against the window, watching the sea shrink below. Ava slept between them, clutching her favorite music notebook. "What now?" Denise asked. "We start over," Darren said. Again, this time he meant it.